That's true. Before we had Clown in a Cornfield, we had Jason in a Cornfield.
For more than a decade, two slasher franchises dominated multiplexes, home video shelves, and late-night cable. While one stalked teenagers through their dreams, the other rose from a lake to punish anyone who wandered too close. In the early 90s, a single closing image in one of those films teased a future collision, and a studio promised that these two icons would eventually share the same screen. What followed was years of negotiations, competing rights, rotating scripts, and shifting creative directions, which meant the long-promised crossover remained in development limbo. When it finally materialized, the story centered on a dream demon who has lost his power after the town of Springwood erased his memory and suppressed nightmares with a drug called Hypnosil. In order to restore fear, he resurrects the killer of Camp Crystal Lake and sets him loose on Elm Street, intending to feed on the panic that follows. And as teenagers begin to die in both the waking world and their sleep, the two legends move towards a confrontation that had been teased for nearly a decade. This week, we're talking about Freddy versus Jason. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Hacker Slash. If you're joining us again, welcome back. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the party. We are a horror movie review podcast dedicated to telling you whether a movie is a hack,
A total joke, a waste of time,
or a slash.
Totally killer, pun intended.
We believe horror is for everyone, and as such, we're rating these movies with the perspective we've gained from our varying walks of life and the flavors of fear we fancy most. My name is Chris, I'm your friendly neighborhood slasher enthusiast. This week I'm joined by the classic horror connoisseur, Sean.
You know I don't like to be touched after, okay? You're tuning in to Freddy vs. Jason, but if you support the show, you'll also get to hear our B-side at the end of this episode where we get into some other fun horror icon mashups.
And that is going to be a great discussion, particularly in the month of our monster madness and our horror games. But for now, Sean, I'm trusting you've seen this before.
Oh yeah, Freddy vs. Jason, definitely one that I've seen many, many times over the years. This is like the Avengers level crossover event that any slasher fan coming out of the 80s and early 90s wanted to see. I feel like it was hinted at since that iconic moment at the end of Jason Goes to Hell and seeing Freddy's hand pull Jason's mask into hell for, what is it, like you said a decade? It felt like more than a decade goes by with nothing but hope. And finally, in 2003, we get this movie. So yeah, definitely seen it. I was hyped when it was coming out. I remember my friends were hyped, and we watched this movie tons of times over the years.
2003 was such a magical year because you had this movie and you had the Florida Marlins World Series over the New York Yankees. But I remember watching this movie when it came out, saw it in theaters, saw it a million times since then. And man, when I first watched this, I was completely blown away because we had the casting of Jason Ritter. You know who John Ritter is?
Yes.
I lived my life in middle school, in particular, getting into high school, making French bread pizzas at 3 a.m., watching Three's Company. So for us to have not only Robert Englund back at the helm as Freddy, not only Kelly Rowland from Destiny's Child, but also to have Jason Ritter, son of the Jack Tripper, I was absolutely floored watching this movie. And when it came time to watch this again, now 23 years later, my God, it is still as fun today as it was then.
It is definitely one of those just fun movies. Watching this back now, it makes me actually feel a little bit sad that this was Robert Englund's final performance as Freddy on screen. Kind of fitting that we are talking about it now because there is a lot of interest for Robert to pick up Freddy as a character potentially one more time in a Freddy Krueger film. We don't know if it's for sure happening, but there's a lot of conversation around it. So kind of exciting, really.
It is exciting, but you also have to look at the fact that this is the first movie in a while where Kane Hodder is not playing Jason. And this movie comes with its own controversy from this. I also need to tell you very honestly, Sean, this movie was my introduction to Catherine Isabel. And how embarrassing is it that I never realized that it was Catherine Isabel? I watched Ginger Snaps, obviously, years later. I can't remember if we discussed the fact that we obviously saw her in this movie, but damn, I was watching it this time and I was like, hold on a second, is that Ginger the Snap herself?
It is. It is. Yeah. That's actually really funny. I was watching this back too, and I was like, oh, yeah, that is her. That's wild. That's wild. What also is kind of really fun about this movie, not really any spoilers, but just the opening previously on every fucking Freddy movie you get, just like, it's like watching the start of like a Dragon Ball Z season where it's like last season on Dragon Ball Z, and it gives you the entire fucking season leading up to this 1 minute like moment that you get. I don't know. Wild, but it was kind of fun.
And the fact, honestly, that it's narrated by Robert Englund himself. It's narrated by Freddy. I really enjoyed that. But I also enjoyed it because with that opening narration, you have two things that happens. One, it's a victory lap for Elm Street mythology, 100%. But you then have the pendulum swing to the classic Friday the 13th setup. So it's a little bit of a cheesy moment. He resurrects Jason, but we also get to really see what it's like to have these two worlds collide. And we talked about like the end of an era with Robert Englund. The thing about this movie is even in that moment, you feel immediately that this is communal horror. This is grab a pizza, grab some beer, and yell at the screen with your friends kind of horror.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's one of those movies. It's full of nostalgia for anyone that grew up watching the Nightmare on Elm Street films, for anyone watching the Friday the 13th and Jason films. It's full of campy fun, some great one-liners, definitely just fun, the kills, the yelling at the screen. It's all there for sure. It also felt like an end of an era, to be honest, because really, when you think about it, what happened after this movie for both of these franchises? Not a ton.
Yeah, it's completely fair. It really does feel like the swan song. Like, this is the last little bit that we're going to get. We had the terrible Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Bad.
But the year before that, we had the, I think, pretty solid Friday the 13th reboot.
Mm-hmm.
But then these franchises have just disappeared. Obviously, with Friday the 13th and its legal battle, now Jason Universe coming back into full force. It's also funny that we're reviewing this at this time, obviously, because it's March 13th. We typically, every Friday the 13th, record a property from the Friday the 13th franchise. We didn't last month because we have run to the end of the line of the Friday the 13th franchise. But we probably should have finished the Nightmare franchise before doing this. But it just feels like it's fine. We're just out here to have a good time.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I wonder if there's enough movies that feature the number 13 that you could start sprinkling in on these.
What we could do are the Friday the 13th fan films. Never Hike Alone. Those are actually pretty good.
Okay. All right. Hey, listen, I'm here for it. I
want to throw out something, though, Sean, that surprised me as I was watching this movie. And it's really two things. One, I never really appreciated before. I think I've known it and I've felt it, but I've never really consciously grabbed onto it. Freddy and Jason are two of horror's most iconic slashers. We have Freddy, Jason, Michael, Leatherface, Ghostface, etc., Chucky. But throughout the Friday the 13th franchise, we have had many conversations about how Jason is a sympathetic killer. This movie, for me, pushes him more into like the heroic anti-hero, the sympathetic killer that you're rooting for because he's better than the child predator Freddy. And it was surprising to me watching this now at 36, 23 years after this movie came out, and really appreciating that more than I ever have before. But the other thing that surprised me was getting into this and realizing that there is a specific death in this movie that I no longer feel good about. It's an entertaining movie as a whole, but I completely was lost to how dark this death is.
For sure. I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit later, 100%. And yeah, I mean, it is interesting when you think about the dynamic that you get when you put these two polarizing characters together on screen. Obviously, there is that sympathy factor for Jason because, his backstory, he was drowned in a lake, he was bullied. You're always kind of rooting for him. In a sense, that's what the Friday the 13th movies are all about. You kind of want to see what Jason can do and rack up the kill count in those movies. Freddy, he's fucking with kids, man. There's something not right about him, but he's kind of funny at the same time. He's got those one-liners, so you're kind of like, I don't like this guy. I don't really want him to win, but I do want to see what he's going to do and say next, you know, because he's sadistic. He does these weird manipulations in the mind and in the dream, so it's an interesting mashup. I will say, not even going that deep into the thought of this movie, there were a few things that really surprised me that I was just vibing with this movie. And I will tell you right now, it always amazes me how many people in these movies are willing to just jump into a nasty, stagnant fucking lake in the middle of the night. You couldn't catch me, and I've said this a bunch of times about jumping into lakes and shit, but I'm just going to tell you, if I'm out in the woods and it's nighttime, even fucking daytime, and there's a fucking lake, let me tell you something. I'm not jumping into the lake. I don't want to swim in the lake.
You're going to have so much bacteria swimming up in you and in the open wounds you have. If not, for some weird creatures that might be living in that lake, you might have a gill man lurking in there. Absolutely not. I can't even swim.
It's true. It just amazes me that some people they take such pleasure in jumping into these lakes. Here's the other thing. Over the years, someone ends up saying some shit that their parents did the shit to Freddy, and now they're paying for it. But let me ask the real question. Whose fucking parents was it really at this point? Because we've got like decades of films where this is brought up, where the parents did this and we're paying for it in this generation. Motherfuckers, we're at like the 5th generation by now. What's happening here? What's happening with these parents, and whose parents are they?
What's happening here is generational trauma, Sean. The cycle never breaks. It always continues.
My great-great-great-great-great-grandfather.
Nightmare on Elm Street bloodlines. Absolutely. That's exactly what this is. But, and at least in this one, what I appreciate is you have the framing of what happened to Freddy after the bloodlines of it all, and more with how is the town as a collective responding to Freddy?
Yeah.
Or how do they solve the problem? How do they deal with it?
Yeah.
One of the things that I appreciate about this is how it really blends Crystal Lake and Springwood. I think it does that really nicely. It's kind of fucking crazy that they're a skip and a hop away when you get down to it. We'll talk about that more in the spoiler zone. The framing of this fits perfectly on a watch with Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, because that is a mockumentary in which all of these movies are real, and these are real things and creatures and monsters that live in our world.
Yeah.
But something that disappoints me in this movie, I'm going to go back to it again. I missed Kane Hodder, because there is something, while this Jason is taller, sure, by a few inches, he doesn't feel as intimidating. So between that and making him feel more sympathetic, there's something about his body language that just feels like wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah. It's wild what a little body language can really do. I mean, when you think about it, you got a mask on the whole time. You're not seeing facial expressions. So it really does come down to those movements.
It comes down to those movements. It comes down to his little sleepy eye, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to see the eyes that close. He just looks like a little guy who got woken up from a nap. And I totally get not vibing with that.
Yeah. I hear you on that for sure. I also think, could it be a disappointment? Maybe. It's also just almost an amazement that these fucking teenagers figure out somehow in this movie how Freddy was pulling this shit off literally out of nowhere. It just felt like we were in a scene and all of a sudden they just had his plan just dialed in. They were just like, oh, so he's literally doing this. It's like, how the fuck do you know what he's doing? What's happening? It just seemed like too easy.
Yeah, you had the meeting in that 70s show basement, and then all of a sudden we're here, we've arrived. What I will say about this is, apart from a few good moments, the teenagers as a whole aren't developed nearly enough to elevate the moral stakes of the movie. This absolutely rests and lives and dies on the shoulders of Freddy and Jason. But I'm okay with that, because when you have two iconic slashers, I don't want to be super into all the other characters. I don't have the time or the bandwidth for it. I think that the core group of friends we have, so we have our leading lady Lori, we have the boyfriend, we have Kelly Rowland as Kia, we have Linderman. They're fine, but the other characters that we add on top of that, where I'm like, okay.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I think this one we already talked about at the beginning. Like it's an entertaining, really fun, campy film that you're just wanting to sit down and have a good time. Like get your brews, your sodas, whatever you're drinking, and you got some pizza, some wings, whatever. You got some friends, some popcorn, and you're just having a good time. You're just vibing with it. I will say this one will have some classic jump scare tactics, nothing super over the top. It's really there, I think, for the fans. And I think with a movie like this, you're really just rooting for the villains at this point. Like you really want to see the face off. You're either on one side or you're on the other. No one's really on the teenager side. Let's get that real. Like we're here to see who wins between Freddy and Jason. That's what we're here for. So it really is just more spectacle than scary.
100%. This movie being entertaining in a spectacle sense is exactly what I have written down in my notes. So I'm glad we're on the same page there.
Mm-hmm.
But this also feels like the escalation of horror meeting pro wrestling.
It does. There are so many ties to it, I feel like.
And I'm not a wrestling fan. The only wrestling things I know are that The Undertaker was a person and Hulk Hogan was involved, and mostly what I've come to learn from you in the Wyatt Six. But this movie, with how Freddy in particular engages Jason, it feels like what I imagine people feel like when they're watching really campy, cheeky wrestling and they're just leaning into the bit. And it makes it fun. It makes it funny. It makes it an absurd escalation. It makes it theater, which I can appreciate.
It does, for sure. It's like the Rock versus Hogan. That's really what this is. It's a WrestleMania moment, you know? It just feels that way 100%. And I would say that this one is, you know, it's conceptually original, but I feel like it's also just structurally familiar. Like it's you know, you have the first of its kind, really, this mashup versus horror movie, right? You don't really have a lot of those.
Well, you have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
Well, yeah, you have
not
mashups.
Versus, but
yes, but like for the slasher icons, like this was a big deal, and so it feels conceptually original. But definitely, there's a lot of familiarities with this, and I think it's one of those movies that feels groundbreaking on paper. But overall, I think it's pretty conventional in its execution. You have to remember this was a true slasher crossover before like the superhero, even the superhero crossovers were big, really, when you think about that. And I think the idea of horror icons sharing a screen, at least these icons from the 80s, it felt pretty huge at the time.
It really did. I mean, when you think about the scale of this is massive. These are two huge IPs, and we haven't gotten anything that is truly similar to this since. We've gotten some knockoff stuff for sure, but there hasn't been the continuity of this. We haven't had Michael Myers square up with somebody, Chucky square up with somebody, etc. The closest maybe we'll ever get is the idea of the Amityville house somehow going to space, and then also Leprechaun went to space at one time, and also Jason went to space. Could you imagine if we had a space crossover?
Oh
That'd
my
be
God.
fucking insane.
In some parallel universe.
Somewhere out there is a universe in which that did happen.
Yeah.
But I think one of the best things about this movie for me is how it wields that balance the entire time, that scale the entire time, and also wins it even in the ending of this movie. When you walk into a movie like this, you have to wonder, like, okay, who's going to win?
Yeah.
But I think in reality, when you get to the end of the movie, I think everybody kind of wins. Like, this is the best case scenario for the movie, for the fans, for every character in the movie. It's just some people live, some people die. We'll get into the spoiler zone if you somehow haven't seen this later, so hang tight. But this was, for me, such a satisfying end to this movie.
It's really interesting that it is so satisfying because, you know, outside of the ending, I mean, I guess you could say that it's about what you would expect from a movie like this. I guess some might say, some might differ on that. I don't know. But it is interesting how satisfying it is because it is deliberately unresolved. I feel like it ends on this almost comic book style energy that gives you a reason to stay on either side of the fence. Like, it doesn't really give you a definitive, here's the end. And, you know, it is very comic book style. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe they wanted to open the door for a potential sequel of some kind if it was going to happen, or a rematch of some kind, but it was kind of fun. I will give it that.
Well, regardless of the fun, I can't wait to see how that shakes into its ratings. But for now, Sean, how would you rate the gore score?
Well, there is a fair amount of bloodshed in this one for sure. Just about what you would expect from either of these slasher franchises. And with two icons at the helm, there is plenty of gore to go around. Was this the last slasher where the gore felt celebratory instead of punishing? I don't know, because it sits right before the shift into a darker, grimmer, like 2000s horror that we got, moving a lot of, like, kind of a departure from the campiness of it all. Either way, I do think this one earns itself a pretty solid medium gore score, because despite the amount of kills and bloodshed, it is just campy enough to stay fun. And so I think that's where it kind of lands for me.
And what about the Animal Report?
The Animal Report, I would say we are all good in the hood with this one.
Let's go ahead and get into our ratings then. Freddy versus Jason from 2003. Was it a hack or a slash?
Well, listen, after years of teasing and playground debates, essentially, watching Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees finally collide feels like a main event horror spectacle. It truly does. It feels like Godzilla versus King Kong from 1962. You know, it was big. The fights are big. The gore is flashy without being, too mean. And the tone leans fully into this camp, which just feels really fun. And the movie knew, like, we aren't watching this for nuanced character arcs. We really came to see the Dream Demon versus the Machete Tank. That's what we came for. Like, we wanted to see these two fight it off and see who could come out on top. And on that promise, I think it definitely delivers. And that's what I really love about this movie. I think the cornfield chaos, the fiery dock finale, I think it all plays out like almost like a celebration of slasher mythology rather than an attempt to reinvent it. And I think more than anything, though, the film radiates just nostalgic fun. It truly does. It feels like the last fireworks show of the 80s slasher dynasty before horror shifted into those remakes and grimmer territory, right? I think there's an undeniable end of an era vibe here. There's a curtain call for two icons who defined a generation of literally VHS nightmares. And I think it may not be the scariest entry in either franchise, but it is pure, unapologetic fan service done with some swagger. And I think you can't help but have a good time watching these two worlds collide, and how everyone getting caught in their path is just fucked. You're just done. You get caught in the middle of this fight, you're out of here. You're toast. And, this isn't just a clash. It is a slash, and it's slashed its way right into horror history.
Listen, if there is anything that people who have listened to this show for a significant amount of time have come to learn about me, is that I'm a sucker for a mashup. I am a sucker for any Glee cover that takes two songs that don't belong together and puts them together in a beautiful way. And that's exactly what this movie does. I want to actually introduce you to a few other crossovers or mashups that we've gotten in the past in media, period, just so you can really see what this has done. We had the new Scooby-Doo movies, Batman and Robin episodes from 1972. We had the Jetsons meeting the Flintstones in 1987. We had in 2003 as well, Rugrats Go Wild, which was the Rugrats and the Wild Thornberrys. We had Frankenstein meeting the Wolfman in 1943. We've also had King Kong versus Godzilla in 1962, Batman versus Predator in 1991, Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, that was a comic in 1976, Archie meets the Punisher in 1994, Archie versus Predator in 2015. So there's been a lot of ground covered in this versus that. And when it comes down to it, taking the slasher spin on it, putting Freddy against Jason, you get something that is imperfect. It's messy. It's tonally uneven for sure, but it delivers the event that it promises, which is more than you can say even about maybe Scream 7. It's franchise spectacle done with conviction and a backbone and leaning into exactly what it wants to do. Freddy versus Jason works because it reframes Jason as the lesser evil and Freddy is the manipulative architect. And it shifts the sympathy in a way that makes the crossover emotionally satisfying without ever redeeming either person in this. Instead, we get to see a group of characters who we kind of live vicariously through as they are passengers to the experience of two titans of horror collide. It's spectacle for sure, but it's spectacle with intention, with flair, with theater, with pizzazz. And I absolutely love every second of it. I feel exactly the same about this movie, barring one moment that is hard to swallow now, that I did when I was a 13-year-old watching it in 2003. And it's undoubtedly a slash. With that, Freddy vs. Jason from 2003 has earned a universal slash. Now, you can find this movie plenty of places online. Go check it out and join us in the second half so we can get into all these spoilers together. We'll see you in a bit.
This episode of Hacker Slash is brought to you by the most diabolical sports entertainment company walking God's green earth. The Terror Wrestling Federation. TWF, brother. This Saturday, get ready for Nightmare Mania, Slash of the Titans. Live from the only arena built on a burial ground and a condemned summer camp. Featuring a Deaths Count Anywhere match. Will the human machete highlight reel prevail over the Texas Chainsaw Technician? What about the pain and pleasure submission match? It's the High Priest of Hooks versus the Deadite King with a boomstick. One promises you suffering beyond imagination. The other promises you shop smart, shop S-smart. Don't forget about the Final Girl Rumble, brother. 30 survivors enter. Only one is the last one standing. Weapons hidden under the ring include a cursed videotape, a possessed doll, and a haunted house deed with adjustable rate mortgage. And for our main event, don't miss Freddy's Boiler Room Brawl, brother! It's the shape of Haddonfield taking on the one and only Dream Demon of Elm Street. One stalks you while you're awake, the other stalks you while you sleep. Will Michael win with the Haddonfield Hammer? Or will it be Freddy's Elm Street elbow because sweet dreams are made of these bows, baby? You think you've seen horror crossovers? This is where franchises come to fight for canon. TWF, where the refs don't see everything because sometimes they're already dead. Order the pay-per-view now because when the lights go out and the bell tolls, there's no safe words in the squared circle, only screams.
Welcome back, folks. You're now entering the spoiler zone for Freddy vs. Jason from 2003, which has earned a universal slash. Now, before we get into the specifics of our ratings, Sean, let's go through those kills.
Well, while this is a clash of two icons, Jason definitely wins the numbers game in terms of the number of kills under his belt in this one, with somewhere around 18 kills. But where Jason wins the numbers game, Freddy brings the flair, I would say. His nightmare theatrics only give us around 2 or 3 kills, but his impact doesn't feel any less grand. And between the two of them, really, we have a total of 19 kills in this one, and there are plenty of wild kills full of slasher fun. So listen, everything from machete hacks to decapitations and really everything in between. So Chris, let's talk about it. Which one of these kills had you dreaming of Camp Crystal Lake?
Wow, there are so many. I mean, even the first kill is a great setup for Camp Crystal Lake. But something that I want to point out real quick, going back to your dynamic of how we have Jason and Freddy split, I also want the count of how many alley-oops Freddy gave to Jason because, you know, he really just set him up for him. He teed him up and Jason got to finish him off.
It is true. It is true. There was just a lot of setups for Jason, but, you know, he got him.
Yeah, you set him up, you knock him down. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. I struggle with which of these is my absolute favorite kill because there are so many good ones. But something that I really did enjoy, and I'm probably going to have to fight very hard not to just talk about this scene later, but it's the Cornfield Rave Massacre. It is Jason turning around, slicing his machete everywhere. There's just so many incredible deaths. One that I struggle with is Gibbs' death. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the guy specifically that is flung off of her and into the abyss, yeah, that one might take the number one spot.
That was really good for sure. There was a lot of just really fun kills in this one. I mean, you have Blake's father getting decapitated, which was kind of fun. You had Mark getting set on fire by Freddy, then getting his face slashed and killed by Freddy. But also, like, you had Freddy's back burned into his back with just like, come on, like Freddy's back burned into his back?
That's fucking crazy. That's crazy work.
Come on. That's just Freddy at his finest for sure. But what the interesting one was, somehow Jason was able to kill Deputy Stubbs by electrocuting him through himself. So he was just like, let me just take some of this and give it to you, you know?
It is absolutely absurd. Some of this shit in here is honestly some of the weirdest stuff we've seen. I'm thinking even about the moment where we see Freddy in like a worm kind of like figure, like on the floor when this guy is like tripping balls. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it was wild. I think, was it Kia that got literally like baseball batted with the machete by Jason towards the end of the film? Just a home run.
She got a few times because if you remember, she got flung in the burning cabin and then got flung to her death against a tree.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my God, just wild. People are getting cut in half. It was a wild time for sure. The machete was the star.
It really was.
The flaming machete.
Okay, that's what I was about to get to, because we had this guy with some quick thinking, dousing Jason in alcohol, lighting him on fire. Then you have this incredibly beautiful shot of him running through the corn stalks, and you're on an aerial view. You see Jason's path scorched in fire. He's running for help, but then you get the flaming machete to the chest.
Oof.
Penetrated. Fantastic shit. It's peak Jason, but I never knew that I wanted Jason in a cornfield. Move over, friendo the clown. You got Jason Voorhees encroaching on your territory.
That's true. Before we had clown in a cornfield, we had Jason in a cornfield.
We really did. And just going back really quick, I mentioned that obviously this movie was my introduction to Catherine Isabel. Gibbs' death it already sucked in 2003. Let's be clear. She's the person that I felt almost the worst for in this entire movie. But now it hurts even more. Just, I don't know, maybe the experiences that I've been through, maybe just like being an older woman, whatever. She's passed out drunk and she's being terrorized in her dream, in her drunken sleep, in her stupor. While being terrorized in that dream, she's being physically assaulted by a guy at a party.
Oh,
Thank goodness, which feels so fucking weird to say in this context, but thank goodness a serial killer was there to stop this guy from going further. She's already dead by Freddy. I mean, let's just be honest about it. But she has the final moments I would never want to have. It's adding insult to injury. It's bad enough she's being preyed upon by Freddy, and then Jason ends up getting her. But to have that guy just like crouch over her being a fucking creep in the dirt, it was hard to watch.
Yeah, it was definitely rough. It's like a trifecta of just nothing good happening. It's like the inception of being fucked over, man.
You literally, but what I appreciate about this movie is that it doesn't feel gross with it. This movie manages to have that and still feel light and still feel fun. I maybe just respond to it a little bit differently now just with my fucking life, but
yeah,
I can appreciate that this movie handles it. And also the guy has great comeuppance. Like he literally gets fucking flung in the cornfield.
Yeah.
This is, I think, if you want to do that kind of thing in this movie, I think this is almost the best way to handle it. It's cut short before anything even worse happens. Sadly, we lose Gibbs, but we lose her, and it really pisses off Freddy because Jason's got her.
Yeah, it is very true. There's one more kill, too, that I think, and maybe this will come up in scenes, too, but Trey getting literally stabbed to death with the machete in bed. Somehow the bed just folded up on him and bent him the wrong way and snapped his spine. That was pretty wild.
Trey was such an asshole, and I was so happy to see him go. Incredible work.
He was such a dick. Oh my God. He had it coming for sure. But wow, what a great kill. Kind of like a callback, to the OG Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy, with in the bedroom, and not the bloodbath really that, we got at that time, but it was a cool little bed fold scene, a little tray sandwich that we made there. So
yeah. But the real question is, Sean, how do you feel about the non-kill of Freddy at the end with the beheadings?
I know. I really am not mad at it. I think it was kind of a fun thing. Freddy really did take a beating at the end of this movie. He got beaten up. His arm was ripped off. He got impaled by Jason's own fucking hand, and then got impaled again by his own, by Freddy's own fucking hand. And then he was decapitated by Laurie. He was just getting railed all over the place. And by the end of it, who got the last laugh? We don't know, man, because Freddy's head was decapitated for sure. But that little wink in there, we're not sure.
If you want to know what happens next in this franchise, look no further than the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic book, which is great. It picks right up with Laurie, and you see what happens to her. I need you to read the comic, Sean.
I know. I have not read it. I'm surprised I haven't read it by now, but it's on my list for sure. I will get to it.
One thing that I love about this movie, especially we're talking about that ending with the beheading and Freddy winking, it's honestly the color treatment and just the way this entire movie is shot. But you have fire and water throughout the final act. You have blue versus orange lighting, very cold and warm at the same time. That contrast is so fucking great visually. But then you have obviously the visual difference even between Robert Englund and Jason. It gives off what they intended to, and this is why they didn't hire Kane Hodder. They wanted to have a more David and Goliath visual contrast to reinforce the idea that this is less of a horror film and more about mythology.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that, but they can make that happen on screen somehow. They can do movie magic. We see Tom Cruise is a short guy. He's seen as tall in some films. We make it happen. We make 100%.
It happen. To be clear, Kane Hodder's not fucking short.
Right. He's just not as tall.
He's just super fucking muscular, which honestly would have made Jason scarier.
That's what I'm saying. But I agree with you. I think the color use is exactly what I had in my mind when it came to the best element of this movie. Outside of just how fun it is and just really getting to see the action, because I think some of the kills and the practical effects that we got were really fun. But yeah, I really did enjoy the use of those colors in the movie. Jason being represented in the cool blue realism type feel, and the dark only being contrasted by the moonlight. There were some really great shots that were happening. Freddy being in those warm reds, the hellish glow, the visual contrast. It does a lot of the heavy lifting in this film. It instantly does tell you whose world you're in, which is very clever. And I think it makes the fight feel mythic, almost elemental, like you said, fire versus water, dream versus flesh. It was very, very cool to see. Yeah, I just, you don't see a lot of that in these types of movies. So very, very fun for sure.
You know what else is fun? Even though Kane Hodder isn't Jason, he has reported that he's still technically in the movie.
Wait, what?
He was a stunt double for Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And that exact scene he was in was played on a TV in the asylum.
Oh, shit. I don't even know if I caught that.
He fucking snuck his way in there, my boy. At least according to him.
That's hilarious. Wow.
You look up Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, you're going to see the guy who plays Leatherface. So Kane Hodder insists that this was his moment in his scene that he was doubling in.
Oh my God. Hilarious. That was good. Man, I did not catch that.
Eagle-eyed Sean sleeping on the job.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Man, but let's talk about some of these scenes, because there were some really fun scenes in this one. And I think, even just that first dream sequence in the police department, you get very fun scenes, little snippets where you see all the missing person flyers. That was a really fun scene. There's a lot of really good little scenes in here. Which of these were some of your favorites, Chris?
Okay, I already mentioned the Cornfield Rave Massacre, which was just fucking iconic. The second one that I really loved is kind of fucked up. And I think it's because it does better than what we saw in Jason Takes Manhattan, which was Freddy discovering he can psychologically break Jason in the dream world. He gets him a little wet, and all of a sudden you have little baby Jason in his little baby mask just all shriveled up in the fetal position, real sad boy stuff. And I think it was a better take for me because, again, we saw that in Jason Takes Manhattan and it became like, oh, okay, what are we doing here? Because you just see Jason just being vulnerable. But to have this done to him here at the hands of Freddy, which also weird layers there, because then what kind of joy is Freddy getting out of this knowing that he's a child predator?
Of course.
He's a child murderer. So he reduces Jason down to his inner child and he's just having a field day. It's gross.
Yeah, it was a great scene. It was the whole setup to all of that. Jason getting tranquilized and entering Freddy's dream sequence in that boiler room, and the battle kind of begins. He chops off Freddy's arms, but it's not really any use because they just grow back, and it's full of these cheesy one-liners from Freddy. It's actually really fucking great. But yeah, when he figures out that Jason is afraid of water, and, you know, then you see Jason as a kid trembling and all that stuff, and he takes off the mask, and then he says, like, now that's a face that only a mother can love. I mean, these are the things you expect from Freddy, which I think that moment was definitely kind of fun for the fans. It was iconic for sure. You definitely another moment where you're like, okay, like maybe we're rooting for Jason a little bit more in that moment. Let's fight back somehow, that kind of thing. It was very, very fun. Even the stoner bug thing in the morgue or the hospital or whatever the fuck that was fucking hilarious. Like, there was some wild shit going on in this movie.
That continues to be the weirdest looking thing in the movie for me, because for all the weird shit we get in this, it is the most CGI, but also I get why it's the most CGI. Well, besides that and the fucking title cards at the beginning of this movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the cut up flesh. Yeah, it was gross. But I get it, and it makes sense, and it feels appropriate for a 2003 movie, so it's still fun.
Yeah.
But, oh man, I'm even thinking about just how fun the opening kill was earlier in the movie. It posed, honestly, it was so funny looking at this. I was looking at this and examining how it frames up the whole dream of it all, because you have Jason stalking this woman, very Camp Crystal Lake-like.
Yeah.
But then he stabs her through the machete, and then the machete goes all the way through this big ass fucking tree.
So much force.
Well, it's not that long. That's the thing. It's not that long. It's not about the force. Like, I believe in the force. But what it was Michael pinning a man to a wall with a knife.
Yeah, that's what it was giving.
All right,
yeah.
I'm not going to be mad at it. I get it. Oh, I'm just going to avert my eyes, look the other way.
You just gotta believe, you know?
Let sleeping dogs lie.
For sure. Even the final showdown between the two with the cabin on fire all around them. What an iconic moment. What a way to end the film for sure. Actually, Freddy's makeup actually melted onto his face because it was so hot during that scene. So, like, when he had to go take that off, it was literally melted to his face. That must have sucked getting off.
Oh, that is terrible. And it sounds really goopy.
Yeah. Can you imagine trying to, like, whatever they had to do to try to, like, loosen that up? I don't know if you have to scrape, peel, use some kind of alcohol solution or something. I can tell you from experience, putting a bunch of face makeup on and stuff like that, it takes a long time to get it off of you. Like, Halloween nights, they're tough, especially when you're out drinking the whole night. Then you come back, you got to try to take it all off while you're not fully sober. Not the best. Now, this guy had professional work done probably for a long time, and he's got to try to figure this out afterwards. That's a lot. And he's probably shooting 12 hours. Who knows?
Yeah, I cannot imagine. I've never had that kind of makeup on my face. So that sounds absolutely horrific.
Yeah. Maybe this is why it was the last appearance as Freddy. He's like, you know what? I'm done with this shit.
I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, I'm getting too old for this shit. Oh my God. But yeah, if you really think about it though, this was the last time that either of these two characters truly felt dominant on screen.
Ooh, was it? Well, no, for sure for Freddy. For sure for Freddy, because the remake that we got was trash.
I guess, yeah, the remake was trash, but the Friday the 13th one, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah,
that one,
we had
not.
survivalist Jason when he had this, when we got Sackhead Jason in that movie running towards that woman after already massacring the rest of her friends. Ugh. That movie was fucking great. That was a great Jason.
Yeah, that is true. So maybe there's one more for Jason there. But it really was kind of like the end for the franchises as a whole, collectively. I mean, there wasn't much that happened afterwards, so it did kind of feel like one of the last appearances. But really a good send-off for sure.
Yeah, what we should have done, we reviewed these movies in release order, but what we should have done was review them in chronological order, because then we could have had Jason X after this, because they did Jason X, obviously in 2001, but set in the future, just so that whatever happened in this movie, it would still be safe for that film.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Well, what are you going to do? We'll cycle back around somehow.
Can I tell you what else disappoints me, though? When you look at the characters in this movie, we talked a little bit about the teenagers, but I also want to throw back to that opening scene again where Freddy is talking to Jason, but he's talking to Jason as Jason's mother, and Jason's mother is not played by Betsy Palmer, who was still alive and was asked to come back, and she was like, nah, no thanks.
Yeah, because from what I read, it wasn't a big enough role for her. Like, she wanted more significance in the movie, which I get, but listen.
Yeah, I also understand it. It's just, damn, what might have been. Rob Zombie also considered for this, and Sir Peter Jackson, Rob Bottin, Guillermo del Toro were also considered to direct it in the 90s when this idea was floating around.
I can't even imagine. That's wild. Any of those people, it could have been a completely different film. You just don't know. That's wild to think about. Rob Zombie might have been maybe a little bit more brutal and less campy for sure. You would have to imagine.
Yeah. Another character we were supposed to have back was Tommy Jarvis.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. But there was Tommy Jarvis, another character that was going to be portrayed by Catherine Isabel. But the role was then swapped, and then they consolidated down the script because they felt like it was too long. So we didn't get Tommy or this other character. I honestly think, sure, maybe the script was too long. I get it. But also maybe we needed the script to be longer, because I could have done with more. I could have loved having Laurie, Will, and friends, and Tommy.
I could have seen it explore a little bit further, a little bit longer. I feel like we got to this place where by the time we actually got Jason and Freddy like facing off truly, it felt like we were like, we wanted a little bit more of like what that could have been, and it was kind of over, before it even began in a sense.
Yeah, again, Grease 2, just when I found you, I lost you. And I get it, because the characters in this movie don't need to be transcendent, right? They just need to be serviceable. They just need to be fine enough to get these two stars to collide. And the stars of the show are Freddy and Jason. As cool as it would have been to get Tommy Jarvis, I also understand that he would have pulled focus. So I get it. I would have wanted it because the fan in me wants it. But I also understand that's like asking Laurie Strode to show up here in Haddonfield while facing off with Pinhead.
Yeah, that's true. You don't want to pull attention from the stars here, which is really the Freddy versus Jason of it all. We don't need any of the survivors from previous installments. We just want to see these two kind of go at it, which that's why I'm saying it could have been a little bit longer. Not necessarily what I think is the worst part of the film. I think for me, the worst part of the film is really that we're left with the possibility of more, but we never actually get it. I wish we could have gotten another follow-up to this. I haven't read that comic, but how crazy would it have been to get a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash and have Bruce Campbell come into the mix would be iconic. I think this was definitely a really fun thing to do, and it's just sad that this was really just the last time that we got to explore this, the one and only time we got to explore this.
Yeah, I do wish there was more. I absolutely do. I think the worst part of this movie is that it does end here. I wish we could have gotten some more continuation. Obviously, the comic book is really fun, but it's not enough when you have this much joy and just sheer delight in a slasher. This could be the next big box office thing that I would love to see at the theaters. But for as honestly insignificant as that criticism is, this movie is ridiculously rewatchable. And I absolutely love getting to enjoy this. I was delighted when this came up in our lineup. I popped it on my TV in my living room, had some popcorn, and just got to relax and transport myself back to simpler days when the world wasn't quite as complicated as it is now. Not that it was a fucking walk in the park in 2003, but this movie with its characters, with its execution of bringing two Titans together, it's just a lot of fun and is really funny on top of that.
Yeah, that's the key word, is fun, and this is just a fun one to watch. I think you don't have to watch any of these movies in any specific timeline, right? You don't have to do that. Although you could watch this like after certain movies, specifically after Jason Goes to Hell, and just kind of have a fun time with it. But overall, you can really just plop this one on any time and just have a good time with it. And so, yeah, it's something that I think anyone should be able to come back to and just vibe.
Yeah, I think I would propose that you watch these things in parallel. Now I want to really craft the best watch order for this, because this really is a one-night stand. It's a layover. It's a Clash of the Titans. This movie doesn't overstay its welcome. But what I do think is really fun is the idea of working out the chronological timeline of the Friday the 13th franchise and then Nightmare on Elm Street, and just watching them all in succession in order. Finishing the Friday franchise, finishing the Nightmare franchise, watching this, then watching Jason X. I think that's the move. Actually, no, watching the reboot? Would the reboot work in that chronology?
Maybe.
We'll do some workshopping then. We'll do some workshopping, and we'll follow up in a future episode over on our blog, because this is going to be my new hyperfixation. But for now, there you have it, folks. Freddy vs. Jason from 2003 has earned a universal slash, and we've certainly had a robust discussion, but the conversation doesn't end here by any means.
If you want to find out what's on the other side of this nightmare and go further than this episode, consider supporting the show by visiting patreon.com/hackerslash, because this is where you can enjoy even more of the show, including bonus content with early access, extended episodes with our B-sides, movie nominations, and live shows.
We'll see you next time, folks, and remember, we're not safe awake or asleep.
Who cares about some fucking dream guy anyway?